Stop deadlifting because it's probably making your back pain worse. In this video, I'm going to show you the best exercises you could do to fix this. What's going on? Dr. Nick back here to discuss deadlift form and how it can actually make your back pain worse. Now the thing is, we have to make sure you're actually prepared to do a deadlift position. Many times when you have back issues and pain and discomfort and we're doing deadlifting, we're not prepared to take on that movement. So it makes things worsening. Now is deadlifting bad for the back? No way, it's good. However, if you're not prepared for it, it could be making the problem worse. So we gotta zoom out and figure out what we're actually dealing with. Now, when we're going into a deadlift position, we're gonna consider three things in this video. One, localized strength to the back. Two, mobility in the hamstrings. And then the three, the range of motion you're actually gonna be moving into. When we consider these three areas, we can start to build up from a foundational standpoint from the ground up to get you back to deadlifting or to deadlifting to get your back stronger and not be in so much pain. To understand why deadlifting potentially might hurt, when you're going into a deadlift position, your hamstrings go on length. So our hamstrings are on the back of our leg, they attach to our pelvis, and they run down the back of the thigh to go into the knee. Now, when you go into a deadlift position, you're doing a hip hinge. Now, if you don't have sufficient length in your hamstring muscles, you'll have to compensate and round from your back and lean over from your back. You do that repetitively, and then on top of that, if you add load to it, it's gonna put a lot of stress and strain to the back. It could be putting strain to the paraspinal muscles, which is on the sides of your spine. It could be putting pressure to the disc in the back, causing some of the issues like a disc bulge or a disc herniation. All of these things can stem from a improper mobility restriction at the hamstrings, leading to a mobility compensation as you do a deadlift position, leading to the recurring issues. So if we really zoom out and focus on one area like the hamstrings, get them more flexible, you can actually start to go really in the right direction in terms of a mobility standpoint, which will help you actually move a lot better. And then on top of that, if we're looking localized at the back, if you are compromised in a position because of a lack of mobility into the hamstrings and you're compensating and leaning forward from the back, those muscles in the low back, the lumbar paraspinal muscles, can't withstand the amount of stress and load you're putting it through, which then overloads it and it strains these muscles. So it can actually irritate the low back localized. We're gonna address this in three different ways. Isolated at the back to work on back strength. We're gonna work on your hamstring mobility, and then we're gonna put it into the actual movement, moving into a range of motion that you can progress through. Let's get to it. When you go into a deadlift position, you're putting load underneath the back. Now, in the concept of this video, the idea is this is painful. So we have to strengthen up the low back muscles, the lumbar paraspinals. We're gonna address that with an isometric. So we simply just need a bench of some sort so we can actually lean over. And then from here, what you're gonna do is just hold the position, because what you're doing here is gravity's trying to push me down. So I have to use my low back muscles from an isometric standpoint to hold this position. This helps beef up the area, the low back area muscles, to withstand more stress and strain, to ultimately to prepare it to go deeper into a deadlift position and not spark up. Now keep in mind, this is one position that we would want to address, and then we have to go further and further down to get all different ranges of motion. So the idea with an isometric, I like to hold for a duration of time. 30 seconds as an example, then you would rest, and then you would repeat about 4 rounds. 4 rounds is good because at 4 rounds at 30 seconds, that's 2 minutes of time under tension. Typically, we like to get 2 minutes of work being done to make actual and illicit change. So from here, again, crossing the arms, holding this position, feeling the low back working from an isometric standpoint. Some progressions to this can be simple ones, and it could start with just your hands. Now, if my hands are across my chest like this, the lever arm from gravity is shorter, versus if my arms are up like this, then the lever arm is longer. So you can just simply move your hands and make this exercise harder without adding weights or anything like that. You start with your body weight, start owning positions, and then you progress off of things. So from here, we'll do 3 progressions in isometrics just from this standpoint, taking the concepts here. This would be position 1, arms across, then position 2, my hands behind the head, and then you would hold this for the isometric, and then progression 3 would be arms straight up like this, and you hold this. So in different positions of your arms, it will be harder. And then you take the same concepts, you hold it for a duration of hold, and you repeat sets and reps for what is going to be the most challenging for you, that you feel like you're getting actual good work being done to the low back. Progressing the isometrics off of the slant is getting into the position of a deadlift form and applying the same concept. So if we take the concepts of the isometrics to load the back, we get in a deadlift position, like we're gonna pick something up, and then from here, we bring our arms over our head and we just hold this position. What this does is puts more load from an isometric standpoint to the back in the position that likely gets irritated. Why is this important? Because if you're gonna be deadlifting and it's inevitable, then let's prepare the body for the position you're gonna get into versus avoiding, feeling better at a random time and then trying it again. That's why it recurs in the cycle of feeling good, feeling bad with pain. So of course, in the beginning, when you're dealing with stuff, you want to avoid aggravating positions and strategically build into positions that spark it up, but this is how you go about these types of things. So you get in the position without picking up something heavy and doing a deadlift, but you get in the position, you isometrically load it to get that foundation down. So again, from here, I get in this deadlift position. So I'm just starting hands on my knees. My back stays nice and long and flat, and I put my arms over my head. Now gravity is trying to push me down like this. So I have to use all of my back muscles here to get up, stay flat, and I hold. The concepts here apply. I could hold it for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and I repeat reps, but the idea is we're getting more prepared for the position, and that's how you can make and build off of progressions from here. Hitting the hamstrings, we have to make sure we have flexible hamstrings. We could start simple and progress from here, but one that you could do multiple times per day, whether you're watching TV, hanging out in the family room, it's an easy one that you don't need any equipment for, is this one. You just lie on your back. From here, you bring your knee up towards your chest, and from here, all you're gonna do is kick your leg straight up until you start to feel a stretch in your hamstrings. From here, you just hold this, say, for 10 seconds. What you're doing here is twofold. You're dynamically stretching the hamstrings because you're activating the opposite side of the joint. So in this case, we're stretching the hamstrings, so we're activating the quads. So it reciprocally inhibits or relaxes the hamstring muscle as you work on the opposite side of the quads. So as you're working on the quads activating, you're dynamically stretching the hamstrings and working a little bit on this active control of what you got into a range of motion. Now, for an example, if you feel no stretch going on in your hamstrings from this position, you could progress it by bringing your knee closer to your chest and then applying the same thing. Likely when you're dealing with a lot of issues with the back, you typically lack hamstring flexibility. So in this case, you probably don't need much knee to chest as you go straight to stretch it. So from here again, you kick up until you feel a stretch. I like to hold this for about 10 seconds. You're gonna feel your quad working, but you'll also feel the hamstrings, nice tugging sensation, and then you come back. If you need more of a stretch, you bring it closer to your chest, and you'll notice you won't be able to kick as far because you're further into the range of motion. My knee going to my chest stretches my hamstrings more, so I'm gonna be limited when I go to kick it, versus if my leg is down like this and I go to kick, I'm out of a range of motion, because your hamstrings flexes the knee or bends it, and it extends the hip. So we're going in the opposite directions. We're flexing the hip and straightening the knee, stretching the hamstrings. So the more I flex, the more I won't be able to straighten it because I'm stretching it on both ends. So you want to play within your range of motion of what you got in terms of mobility and just get a nice stretch to the hamstrings. You repeat this over time, your hamstrings get a lot more mobile, and it helps you actually get into the deadlift position. Is this the end-all be-all stretch that you should do? Of course not, but this is one option that you could start to implement daily because it's simple and you could build off of progressions with flexibility to ultimately help you in the long run. Modifying the range of motion into a deadlift movement could be a great foundation starting point so that you could build off of. So for an example, going all the way to the ground with a deadlift seems to aggravate it because you lack hamstring mobility or your movement mechanics are off. We could then start to work into an available range of motion and build off of that. So for an example, I'm just gonna be using a box here with 4 risers, but where you are is gonna be dependent on your flexibility. And a good gauge is to see where your hamstrings actually pull from. The way to do that is you bend your knees slightly, keep your back nice and flat, and think about getting your butt up towards the sky. So when you do that, you're gonna start to bend your chest forward, butt to sky, and you stop right when you start to feel a tugging sensation in your hamstrings. When you do feel that, you put your arms down, and wherever your arms are, that would be your starting point. So you raise up wherever you got. You could use some light weight if you want to add weight to this, but you raise up to the point where you got, and then this would be your modified position working into your range of motion depending on your flexibility of your hamstrings. The other example is if you are here and you bend your knees slightly, you go butt to ceiling, and you drop all the way down. You're like, I feel nothing, I feel nothing, I feel nothing. Oh, right there. Now you're lower, so now you'd be pulling off from here, because the concept with this video is we lack the mobility in the hamstrings, and we lack that motion, so we're just rounding from the back, compensating. So you don't want to do that. You want to modify the position. So in this case, I'll be modifying as this. So my knees will be bent slightly, back stays flat. I sit my butt back, I feel the hamstring tug right there, I come to the position, and I come up. So now when I'm staying stiff in my abs and I'm stiff in my whole lower body, I'm working into the available range of motion that I got without sparking up the back discomfort. This plays a huge role so that you can build off of this. Once you start to feel good from isometrically working it, working your hamstrings, you could then go lower and lower and lower. So for an example, you did this for a little bit, a week or so, now you know you can actually go a little bit lower. And then you're here and you notice no discomfort into the back because you're working into a new range of motion that's improving as you're working on the strength of the back and the mobility of the hamstrings. You could then eventually get lower and lower and lower so that you can get back to deadlifting in a further range of motion with more weight and ultimately not spark up the discomfort. I hope this video gave you some insight on some things you could start to do to ultimately get back to deadlifting. It's not to say that deadlifting is bad, but when you're dealing with pain and issues and you're not prepared for the movement, deadlifting in the moment might not be the best option for you. So you might want to modify the range of motion. You might want to modify the weight, the positions. You might want to strengthen the back. All the concepts that we went over in this video, I hope they really gave you some insight and value to understand the approach on how to address this. And if you did find value in this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe down to my channel below, like this video, leave any comments in the comments section, see if this was actually helpful for you, any additional things that you want to see or want more feedback on, let me know down below and I'll do my best to help you out. Till next time, this is Dr. Nick.